Okay, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, Maura, and welcome to the Make Life Rich Movement podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Everyone, we are speaking with an absolute maven in the cookie industry. Wow. Mara, you have 20 years of baking professionally, which is very, very impressive because bakeries are kind of hard to keep running, and cookie companies are especially difficult to keep running, especially those that are independent like yours. So, I, for one, am just so fascinated and absolutely impressed with everything you've created. And I cannot wait to dive into everything about your cookie and baking empire. You are the CEO and head baker at Fancy Pants Baking Co. I absolutely love the name. It's so cute. And your branding and your packaging and just everything about your product, including some sustainability practices that we'll get into, are really impressive. And just, guys, overall, you try this cookie and it's going to be a cookie that you keep on order, repeat, or you grab every time you go to the store because they are delicate and delicious and just like the perfect size snack. And that comes from my husband and mother. I can't have gluten, but the cookies that Sarah, your publicist, sent were so delicious. And both of these individuals are not really sweets people. So I was very impressed with their review. I was chomping at the bit, like, come on, guys, what is it? And they loved it. They were so absolutely impressed with the cookie and loved the flavor combinations. But you're just a phenom, and I'm so excited for our conversation today. And I
Well,
would
thank
love
you
to know.
so much. I really appreciate all of that. It's a really,
No,
really
we're
lovely
giving you your flowers
introduction.
today. It's a very impressive career and a very delicious cookie, and both of those things are often hard to find in the same conversation, let alone the same business. So I'm just blown away by everything you've done, and I would love to know where your baking journey started. What are some of your earliest memories of baking that I'm sure led to where you are right now?
Yes, they definitely did. I grew up baking with my mom, and my grandmother lived across the street from us, and it was really, part of our almost daily life, definitely weekly life. I would come home from school and I would cross the street and go to my grandmother's house, and she'd be whipping up some chocolate chip cookies. Or if it was a little later, she maybe had baked some and brought them over, and we would all have them for dessert. Birthday cakes were always, and still are a huge part of our family celebrations. So baking is something that definitely, when I think about being a kid, when I think about just early memories, they often are in a kitchen, mixing up always sweets, brownies, cookies, cakes, cupcakes, things like that. Really things that are, fun to make, really great to make with kids too. You can be creative and make them your own, or you can follow a recipe and do the same thing every time. But they always come out great, and nothing's better than like a nice, warm baked good. So that was, truly where the inspiration came from when I was thinking about making a career change. Was, you know my background and what I love to do growing up.
Ugh, I love that so much. And to have that connection, just getting home from school in general was always like the highlight of your day during the school year. But to know that you got to go home to basically a freshly baked treat is probably the greatest thing that could have happened to a little
Right.
kid. So,
Yes, exactly. And I know I'm so lucky. And as a kid, I thought that that's what everybody went home to, right? And I
mhm.
thought that, like, delicious cookies were sort of part of just the way life is.
Mhm.
So, much later as an adult, when I was thinking about, what does everybody love, and it was kind of like an indulgent, delicious
Mhm.
cookie is something that really kind of brings a smile to anybody's face, whether you're 5 or 50 or 100.
Because, not it's such a beautiful statement that not everyone gets to come home to freshly baked delicious cookies or even just delicious cookies. So the fact that you then later turned it into a cookie empire to where people can have these delicious cookies waiting for them when they get home from school is kind of just a really beautiful full circle moment there that got me. It's, there's everyone has, a different way of being able to grow up. And my mom was home until I was 12, and then my father got really sick and she had to go to work. And, the cookies ended and the sweets ended. And it was kind of, it's interesting the way that cookies are very reminiscent of innocence in your childhood, because there is kind of a moment where you're the one that has to make the cookies for yourself. And a bit of the
Right.
charm is lost unless you're sharing it with someone else. So it's so beautiful that you got to have that throughout, your childhood, and then reacquainted yourself with it as an adult. So what was that
Right.
reacquainting period like with baking to where you are now baking for others?
Well, but I think you just said that so beautifully. It is, when I was thinking about starting the company, I had sort of my childlike memories of it, and it was all positive, 100% positive. And I got excited. It wasn't something I planned on as a career, but when I started thinking about it and then I decided to move forward, it suddenly got a lot more complicated because it's a completely different experience to be thinking about purchasing a lot of ingredients and equipment and eventually hiring personnel and having the proper business certifications and licenses and things like that. So it was exciting, but it really does shift. Like, wait a minute, there's a lot that goes into. It's not just bake and then eat. it's There's a million things to think about, but it is great because ultimately what you wind up with are products that, yes, you're sharing and then getting feedback from people, and it feels great.
It is, it's got to be so rewarding to, well, first, I guess I'd like to start with, when did this become a professional endeavor for you? Were you still cooking at home to make the cookies? How did this kind of snowball into you deciding, like, okay, I'm ready to make a career change? And what were you doing before this?
Sure. So this year is our 20th anniversary. So it started 20 years ago, which is really hard to believe. And what I had been doing, my background was in neuroscience and education. So I was doing something completely different. I was sort of a research associate helping with grant giving for early literacy in math and science. And it was, as I started to look more longer term, I was in sort of my late 20s and I was thinking, is this, the field that I want to stay in? And I started to daydream a little bit and thought, I wonder if I could do something with cookies. And it really just started as like a wonder and a wish. And then the more I thought about it, the more excited I got and realized that I could do both for a short time. I could keep my position, but I could also apply for a residential kitchen license and bake out of my home, my apartment in Boston, and sell to area stores. So within a few months of the sort of dream of I wonder if, I got everything I needed lined up, and I came up with the name and started, did a lot of recipe testing and then got out there. And I was extremely fortunate. I got great feedback right away. And I started in February and then March and April. And by May, I could see that the business actually had enough momentum behind it that I was able to leave my full-time job, which would just, that wasn't a plan. It was like, maybe I can do this for a year or two or three. But then after just a few months, I was so busy baking that I had my head on my desk at work and I thought, oh, well, this isn't right.
Wow. That's so amazing. And it's almost as if you were kind of rewarded with taking the leap to just start with some action instead of waiting for the right moment.
Yes, I think I was almost propelled into it. It was like forced in a way because it is exciting, but it's also terrifying. I think to make any sort of big change, there's and so I got to the point where it's like I actually can't do both. Let me see. I'm going to take that leap. hold my breath and see what happens. So
Wow.
it was really exciting.
Oh, that's so inspirational. For everyone listening, I want you to really have this be an example that you sear into your brain when you think that you need to wait for the perfect moment for something to be just right to take off, like a business or, a project. Mara literally decided while having a very full-time job that was probably very taxing mentally. You were a researcher, you were just grant work is so difficult, and you still found the time to set up the paperwork. Find, like, all of that was strenuous. However, that bit of time of hard work has set her up for 20 years of success. If she had waited for the perfect moment, who knows what year she'd be in right now, if at all, because you cannot, we can't control life, but you can control the way that you navigate things that come your way. And I think that's how you become a sharp entrepreneur that's able to evolve and grow, as Mara has done, to a 20-year anniversary, which is so amazing.
Another great point. There's almost never a perfect moment for anything, whether it's starting a business or doing. There's always part of you that thinks, should I? Or at least there's always part of me, right? Like maybe I should do this, but I think you're right. It's sometimes you just go with it. But I did spend some time. It was sort of an educated leap, right? Like I had some data behind me. People see I'm getting reorders. I think I'm gonna keep getting orders. I can eat cookies if I can't eat anything else.
Yeah, true, very true. You can survive off of a cookie.
Right.
So, what was that first year like? And were there any major kind of learning curves or bumps that came your way that you didn't really anticipate having to figure out to be able to continue on?
It was, it was crazy. It was so busy. There were so many different things. It was the type of thing. I now have 2 children, and in some ways, when I look back to when you have a child and you think, well, of course I can raise a child. They're a little human and it'll be fine. I think that in some ways, starting this business felt the same way. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, I didn't anticipate this. I didn't even know that I didn't know this. So there's so many moments like uh, just where I was kind of discovering like, oh, equipment comes to mind all of a sudden, like this little mixer, it was like a 5-quart KitchenAid mixer that I used, suddenly wasn't nearly big enough. Well, what do I do? And it was like, where do you get equipment? Oh, should I get new or used? So, things like that. And
Yeah.
um, really, there were lots, even down to the very small things, like I'm approaching store owners asking them, would you like to carry my product? What's the best time of day to do that? Definitely not a Saturday at 12, right? Because they're completely overwhelmed with what they're doing. So it's like, how about like a Tuesday morning around 10? Maybe a slower traffic, So there are these small lessons that I think I learned lots of trial and error. And again, I think having a business like cookies, you can, if you really make a mistake, you can beg for forgiveness with cookies. And in general, I think being in the food business, it's a very friendly field
Yeah.
because that's been my experience. People really do want to see you succeed. They want to offer advice. They can share their experience. So I've been very fortunate, since day one. People have said, hey, did you think about this? Or let me tell you what I did.
Ah, that's so special. And again, it just seems like the more you kept daring to go and go further, things fell into place. People wanting to help, you figuring things out, but then now that's something that you know and it's in your tool belt. I I love so much that you had at one point the problem of scaling, which meant bigger equipment, which I'm sure meant leading to your first facility. And
Yes.
that was right alongside you having two very young children. It looks like under three. So, gosh, that had to have been a really crazy time. But what was the scaling portion of your business on the production side like for you? I'm sure that was just a brand new frontier.
That it was completely new, had just like every day was learning something new, which is what I said I always wanted. I want a career where I'm constantly learning, and I always laugh because it's still true. 20 years in, the business today is so different than it was even 5 years ago, 10. And so I feel like we're always trying to learn from what we're doing and figure out where we're going next. But for sure, moving out of the apartment kitchen to a commercial space was a completely new experience. So it was, visiting a lot of places, looking at used equipment, even, getting bank loans to figure out how can we help finance this. Luckily, you don't need a lot to start to bake cookies. You need a mixer and you need ovens, and really you can go a long distance with some pretty basic things.
Mhm.
And again, I think I've always relied on sort of the way I grew up, which is like you stretch what you have, and that's been something that I've always relied on, and we still do today. Like, what do you need? Absolutely. How are we going to pay for it?
Mhm.
And we really can't go further until you maybe invest more money or try something new.
Mhm.
So it was a lot of moving parts and putting puzzle pieces together to make that first commercial space leap. But as soon as we did, it was fantastic. It was like, oh my gosh, how did we ever get done? In the apartment. And we've moved twice actually. So we moved first to 1,000 square feet, and now we're in about 25,000 square feet. So it
Whoa.
was moving to a huge, relatively speaking, a much bigger place. It felt another challenge. It was years later,
Mhm.
but I think the first move was maybe a little bit more shocking than the second.
Wow. Everyone, I hope you understand you're literally getting a master class in business right now because Mara's saying all of the things that you go to business school and you don't hear, and they are the integral glue that keeps together every single little action that leads to you being able to just open the doors and like every day, let alone succeed, let alone thrive for 20 years. Also, if you're not really aware of like square footage, a 25,000 square foot facility for making cookies is a big effing deal. It's like, that's a facility. How many cookies are you making a day in this size facility just to give them an idea of scale? Because this is literally no small feat. Like what Mara's doing is allowing her to, in essence, be a nationwide distributed product because of the amount of output that they are doing in production alone. So, can you break down some stats for us just to give everyone context of having gone from your kitchen, K, in square foot space?
Yes, definitely. Right. I thought as I said that, I didn't used to think in square feet. So I, understand that most people aren't thinking of their kitchen space in that way. So
Yeah.
in perspective, if I'm at home and I'm baking some chocolate chip cookies, I might do 20 to 24 at a time, in 20 to 30 minutes on two different baking sheets. Now, if we're baking for, say, 6 or 7 hours per day, in 5 business days, we can do at least 500,000 cookies. So it's a big change.
My face hurts. Wow.
Yeah, so our our facility really smells like, butter and
Yeah.
chocolate on chocolate chip cookies days, and
Yeah. You probably walk around the grocery store and people are like, where's the candle? And you're like, it's just my
yes,
sweater. I'm
yes.
sorry, it's me.
Just came from work. I just smell like a cookie. Yes, actually, people tell me that quite a bit.
I
That
bet.
you smell like a cookie.
I bet. And I just like want to congratulate you because you seem like an individual that I'm sure takes moments of presence and gratitude, but like, holy moly, Congratulations on everything you've been able to build. A sound business that lasts longer than 10 years is almost like a unicorn these days. But to be at 20, to be navigating the last 10 years of changes in commerce and the way that we exist and live, and still coming out on top of that, and now being at the place to where you're pumping out 500,000 cookies within a work week, you are able to be, I'm sure, nationally distributed at this point, potentially internationally distributed, and it all came from you jumping off of that school bus and feeling those feelings that stuck with you so long that you decided to choose joy over a career that made sense but like wasn't lighting you up inside. And it's insane to think the amount of bags that get opened and tried and enjoyed and loved because you like made that decision. Like, does that ever like wash over you and you're like, whoa?
Well, I mean, I love the way you frame that, and it sounds really beautiful, and I appreciate it. And I should probably spend more time, thinking that way. I think it can be hard to think about that, about yourself and what you're doing. I do try in small ways to make sure, that I'm sort of focused on where I am each day, and know how fortunate I am that I have two healthy children, and to sort of take stock. And of course, I have an amazing team of people that some who are newer to the team, but some who have been with us now for a decade.
Wow.
And you really do need so many people along the way to keep
Mm-hmm.
something, especially like you said, for 2 decades, there's just been, there's so many things that come up, so many changes, whether on a small level or like a sort of national or global level. And it is important to stop and reflect. So I appreciate what you're saying. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
my pleasure. You deserve it and more. It is really, I speak to so many entrepreneurs and they're always just like you, and you can tell halfway through I'm like, "Wow, you don't know how cool you are." I'm going to tell you really quickly because you're a getter done kind of individual, and I admire, I'm that person too, and I know that sometimes I'm like, oh wait, I am doing cool stuff. I should really be proud of what I'm doing, but I've made it a point to tell others because we just get so caught up in the action of it all and we forget why we started. And
Right.
you're hitting the nail on the head with everything you're doing, and it has to, you deserve to be happy and feel good about that.
Oh, thank you. It's often nice to see it, reflected in other people's eyes too. If you say to somebody, whether it's like children at a soccer game or adults at a dinner party, what do you do? I own a cookie company. Everybody's eyes sort of said like, really?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Oh,
it's a kind of a reminder, like, huh,
having it in your birds? Like, okay.
right. I always travel with cookies.
Oh man, let's talk about your cookies because I love, first of all, your name is Fancy Pants, so that like really has to tie in here and give you guys a really special clue that there is always one ingredient that feels a little bit upscale, a little bit like tossed in there for the joy of it. So walk us through what went into creating your cookie lineup of the different flavors that you have, and maybe if you want to start with the order that you kind of created them in and why it was essential to have that special ingredient in each one of those cookies.
Sure. So, I mean, I guess for a little bit of context, originally the company was a decorated cookie company. We made very like handcrafted cookies that looked like, say, baseballs and snowmen, very seasonal, holiday related, and so they were kind of a decadent, fancy cookie. And that part of where Fancy Pants, the name, I chose Fancy Pants Baking Company because it was meant to be something sort of very lighthearted and initially maybe meant to just be like a short, a short period of time. I wasn't sure that it was going to be something forever. And I was like, well, Fancy Pants, it's kind of fun. And I tried it out a little bit and everybody sort of laughed. And I was like, oh, this is great. That's the way cookies should be. Light, fun, joyful. So the name was just meant to sort of capture the way I think of cookies as celebratory in a way and lighthearted. And more recently, just in the past 18 months, when I was thinking about how can we really become more of a nationally distributed company, something that's a more like every day, every week type treat. And I started to think about what I baked growing up a lot was just straight up like chocolate chip cookies or oatmeal raisin cookies, kind of classic, right? Like I was baking with my grandmother,
Mhm.
and she had grown up in the in the 20s and 30s, and so I was starting to think like, how about some classic cookies, but then they have to be a little bit fancy. So what can we do there? So there were a lot of different, lots of different ideas, but I wanted classic. I wanted indulgent, so nothing, no sort of like diet type cookie. Just wanted it to be real butter, real sugar, premium type ingredients that you might have in your own pantry. Right, that's what I reach in the pantry and I got out the sort of staples. And I'm also really, on a personal level, into sustainability, recycling, and there's a way that you can upcycle ingredients that aren't used to their full potential. So just to go in, it's an old concept, I think, but with like a renewed interest because so many people are thinking more about the environment and the climate. So upcycling is if you have a food product or another product, but we're talking about food. Um, for example, when you make oat milk, which is delicious to drink, there's some runoff that normally is just wasted. It goes and it's not used for anything. But now we can actually mill that into a flour. It's perfectly nutritious. It has
Oh.
fiber and protein, and it's just sort of a new way to use what was being wasted. So we use upcycled flour as part of our ingredient deck, and it's just something that it's kind of like a little bit away, a little bit of personal way to say like I'm doing a little bit something,
Mhm.
a little something good.
And that's a lot of something good because you need flour as the main ingredient for every one of your cookies. So that is a
Right.
really big impact, especially when you're making 500,000 a week.
Right, right. So, and that's the thing. So we use some upcycled oat flour. We use some King Arthur is another flour that we use, and we mix them together. But you're right, we use thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of flour.
Mhm,
And the impact of that is that we're diverting so much food waste.
mhm.
And you can't, it tastes great. It just tastes
Yeah,
like regular flour.
yeah.
So I love that. And I think it's something that people can do, um, on their own. You can use what you think might be wasted and turn it into, leftover night, things like that.
Yeah.
It's sort of our version of doing that.
Yeah, and you're right. It is an older practice. We wouldn't have wasted any of the ingredients because they were so precious to have. And I
Right,
love that this is having an economic benefit so that businesses will create a pipeline for this excess that would normally reach a wasteland rather than it being used perfectly because it is literally just remnants of what was just squeezed out of some oats soaking in some water.
right,
And I think there's so much room for consumers to understand the farming practices, let alone the harvesting and the production practices of just the raw ingredients before they go into the thing that is combined with other ingredients and made into a cookie or cereal. But to have there be awareness now just from buying a bag of cookies that you are now becoming aware that this system not only exists, but it's an option and a choice for businesses to have at their disposal to not only be more sustainable, but to create, in essence, this social responsibility loop that the more of you do it, the more popular it will become, the more people will request that you do this, and it is going to create a social change over time. And I love that it's happening with cookies.
I That's right. I think it's everybody's responsibility to do what they can, and this is just our sort of way. It's a small way, but I feel really passionate about it. And like you
Mhm.
said, the more you scale, the more widespread and the more common it becomes. And I have another, sustainability piece that we do that I am even, just as passionate about. But it's people ask a lot what we do with our cookie crumbs. Do you ever burn cookies? And it's like, well,
Oh.
we try not to, but definitely we certainly make mistakes.
Mhm.
Things happen all the time, especially with the number of cookies that we're making. So we also have, we used to just have to throw them away, and these are ones that we can't donate.
Yeah.
We donate if we can, but if there's something actually wrong and they're inedible,
Mhm.
then we didn't want to just throw them away. It just looked horrible to see these mounds like going to a
Yeah.
landfill. So we partnered with a company that takes that waste and brings it to a farm, which is about 60 miles away. It's put in a gigantic digester, it's called. It's mixed up and through an amazing process
Mhm.
is turned into electricity that then powers the very farm that hosts the digester. So it is a completely closed loop and it is a win-win for everybody. For us, we're not throwing anything away. The farms then have free electricity and they can use
Mhm.
to reinvest in their business and compete with much larger dairy farms in the country. These are like more local, regional
Mhm.
farms. So it's just another example. I think if you look around and you get creative, there's just so much that we can do,
Mhm.
and it's a win for everybody.
Wow. I thought I was impressed before, and now I'm just a little blown away. It's so just undeniably unique of you to have reached the level of success that you're at and then decided to pivot entirely into a whole totally different kind of cookie. And within that process, still, you found two major things to add on your plate that eventually lead to a more streamlined process. You feel better about what you're putting out there. People can feel good about what they're eating. Was there a moment where you kind of knew that you wanted to have a more conscious impact with the cookie just because of the size you were growing to? Was it just a matter of you recognizing the sheer volume of what work you were doing and realizing you could do something a little different?
Yes, that's exactly. I do remember a couple of moments. It's sort of. I think we've always tried to do things, recycle in the office or do, just small things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, as we've grown, it's just become like we have, a bunch of employees and you really start to see, the impact of every decision when you're thinking about the group that you have created. And it was like, there has to be something that we can do here. And what can we do? And I think that's just part of again how I think. I sort of love to make like process improvements. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, what we're doing is great. And maybe to your point, maybe I need to slow down a little bit and sometimes celebrate that. But also like what else could we be doing that's a little bit better,
Mm-hmm.
either, for the product, for the facility, for our employees, for the community.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to make sort of little tweaks because I think that's they're more sustainable when you make small changes for the most part than when you try to do something huge. So it's sort of just like an incremental approach that I take, and at some
Mm-hmm.
point I just thought we need to do something with this food waste. So it's been a few years that we've worked with this program, and I love it every day.
My goodness. I had an idea of what this conversation would be about, but in hearing it all kind of live and coming together, you are, to me, excellent blueprint for a business looking to be an impact driven yet product revered business. Your cookies are so good that people are buying them week after week and in turn are helping you to create an impact. And I think that's what every impact driven business owner is looking for. But excuse me, there seems to be a very delicate balance between that being the carrot led, the on the stick, like, oh, we're sustainable. And I love that you are the other way around. It was like, come try this delicious cookie. And then they eat the cookie and they're like, I need these. I need these every week. And then, one day they're just sitting on the couch and they turn the bag over and they're like, oh my God, wow, who knew? I'm 12 bags deep and this is amazing. And I love that's the silver lining that your cookie fans are eventually going to come to, whether it's immediately or a couple of bags in, and then they think, wow, like not only is it a great product, but they're doing good with it. It's very refreshing, and I think you are like the most compact and perfect example of how a business can do that without clubbing anyone over the head with it. I think sustainability has almost become like the greenwashing of products and
Right.
sustainability, imposing, and there are a lot for those listening, there are a lot of companies out there that have figured out very clever and not so sustainable loopholes for being able to call something sustainable. It's just like oh, this is a green and healthy product. No, it's not. Okay. You have to be very mindful of how things are packaged and marketed to you, how they're expressed. And Mara has literally done the exact opposite of this and hasn't even mentioned with any real force that this is happening simultaneously to you enjoying your cookie while you're watching The Bachelor, or your kids are getting to pull them out of their lunch bag, or maybe even getting off the bus and it's mommy, can we open the fancy pants? You sure can. Go right ahead, grab your cookie. Like there's such a grace in which you've kind of created this really beautiful, just cyclical entity of happiness and like making things a better place. And I want people to understand that they can do this too. And you can do so in a way that isn't, you know, really overt and making it less of a thing that people want to engage in.
That's right, right. I mean, first and foremost, when you want a cookie, you want to probably celebrate something or have a little treat, or give us a little something sweet to your children or friend, whatever. And that's right. It's meant to be that first. You're spending money that you worked hard to earn, and you want something that tastes delicious. So that really is the sort of the priority, right? Like I want, I'm grateful. There are so many choices in a grocery store. So if you decide to pick us off the shelf, I'm so grateful that you've made that choice, and I want to reward you by saying like, wow, I love this.
Yeah.
And everything else is like you said, yeah. Read the back of the bag; it's fun. It's like the back of the cereal box. Check out our little peacock, who's doing a little bit something different on every bag.
I love the peacock. It's so cute. I love your branding too. It really does feel like a little ceremony when you open the bag. The packaging is beautiful. It really does feel like an occasion. And I think that that is something, the world just seems to be getting crazier. So everyone needs a cookie break every now and then or a little treat. And you really do feel that moment when you're opening that beautiful red bag and you can see like the cookie, the actual picture of a real cookie of what you're going to eat is on the outside, which I love so much. You kind of get an anticipatory glance of what you're in for. Let's run through the cookie flavors again. So it's the chocolate
Sure.
chip, and then you have a gluten-free chocolate chip.
Yes. We also have an oatmeal raisin.
Hmm.
We have a mint chocolate,
Ooh.
birthday cake, salted caramel, and we just this fall, in the past few weeks actually, launched a pumpkin chocolate chip. Being pumpkin season, so pumpkin
Oh,
chocolate
guys, do you
chip.
hear that? Pumpkin.
And
Okay.
very, very soon, I can
Yeah.
say that we have ginger snap,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is anytime I went over my grandmother's house, no matter what she was baking, she always had ginger snaps in her cookie jar. So,
Ginger snaps are so underrated. They are such a
yes,
delicious cookie and they're falling out of favor. And I hate that they've been labeled like, like an older person's cookie from the 60s. No, guys, ginger snaps are freaking delicious and they're good for you, okay?
I,
Ginger is a really delicious, healthy ingredient.
it is, and it is, right? It's like It's a kind of has a little bit of a zing, but there's still some sweetness there. So yes, I'm hoping to, really make the ginger snap cool again.
Oh, the ginger snap will be cool again. If anyone can make it cool again, you can because your cookies are just amazing. I always ask this last question to all of my guests, so I would love to know, Mara, how do you make your life rich?
Well, I have two beautiful boys that I love spending time with. So pretty much anything I do outside of work in some way, touches upon what they're doing in their lives. So they happen to be both very athletic. So I do a lot with them in the community. And I share a lot of cookies with various sports teams and nonprofits in the greater Boston area who are, either winning games or doing fundraisers. So, I have a great family and lots of friends in the area. So, try to spend as much time as I can uh, in between, baking the cookies.
That's so beautiful. Where can everyone buy your cookies? Where shall we direct them to? And I'll make sure all the links are in the show notes.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, fancypantsbakery.com. That's our website, and it's probably the best place to look. It shows you can type in your zip code and see what stores were carried at near you. It links to our social media. We're on, Instagram and TikTok. So if you want to follow along there, we'd love to interact with people that way.
Yay. And guys, if you see your zip code doesn't have a local store, pick a store in the area and tell them that they need to get some fancy pants on the shelves because
Absolutely.
you're
We'd
going to need
love
close
that. Or drop,
access.
drop me a line and say, I'd love for you to be carried here and we can reach out. You have no idea how powerful, one suggestion can make all the difference.
I personally have asked for so many of my guests on the show's products to be featured at even our local Acme has taken on some. So there is a lot of power in you saying you want something from the place that you frequent for purchasing your food, guys. Just know
There
that.
truly is.
Yeah, and you can make all the difference in a small business owner just by requesting that. And then other people get to discover it. So do it. It takes 2 seconds. Mara, thank you so much for coming on. You are a true delight. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Congratulations on 20 years. And I just look forward to seeing Fancy Pants cookies all over every shelf I walk into. And you just deserve all the success. And thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
on. It
Thank
means a
you
lot.
so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure to talk with you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.